My name is Josh Marble. I'm a software architect at RSA. I'm from the Kansas City area, so if anyone wants to come out to our DevOps Days in KC in the fall and visit the city fountains, we'd love to have you. I'm going to guess that most of you don't work at an open source company. Maybe all of you. I'd be surprised maybe if anyone here does. And your company may or may not be friendly to open source software, whether using it or creating it or whatever. There's a lot of misconceptions out there. But I would bet that some of you do want to use open source software or even create some open source software of your own. So at RSA, we have a history of not being real friendly to open source software, at least in the product that I'm on. I specifically remember some conversations where we wanted to choose a particular dependency project just because there was a commercial paid license available. So when it comes to trying to open source some software there, it was going to be a challenge for sure. But we had an idea, a project that wasn't part of our main product, and we thought, you know, this really is possibly a candidate for open sourcing this software. How are we going to do this in our company? So this talk is really about that. It's about finding something in your company, whether it's a new product or an existing project, that you can create and open source inside a company that historically sells their software. This isn't necessarily about open sourcing your paid product. You're probably not going to be able to do that. But this is about creating an open source project that can infuse some open source culture into your company and expand your horizons without having to change your whole business model. So if you told someone at your company that you wanted to create an open source project, what's the reaction that you're going to get? For a lot of you, I imagine it's going to be not too positive. That's because giving away software can be very hard, depending on who you're talking to. A business person or a salesperson doesn't understand why you want to give software away. If you have some conversations with them, though, you'll probably realize that this is largely due to misunderstandings and a lot of misconceptions. Because business people already have an idea of how the software business is supposed to work. But they have also a lot of misconceptions about open source software and what that means. Sorry. So the first thing that you're going to have to do is you're going to have to break down those misconceptions. And as you do, you're going to have to continue breaking down more and more misconceptions, because oftentimes you'll find that whenever you break down one, it really just uncovers another. But the more you do this, the more people are going to understand where you're going, and you'll be infusing open source culture as you do this. So let's talk about some of the misconceptions that you're probably going to encounter. Of course, the first one's always going to be about money, right? On the surface, trying to do this, trying to open source some code, doesn't make a lot of sense financially. Because the business person's question is going to be, how can I make money from this? If it's open source, we're not going to charge money for it. Why? What's the benefit? Why would we do this? Because they see a direct correlation between a product and revenue. In a paid software company, your traditional sales process is going to be build a new feature, win sales, get service through a professional services team, and then build subscription revenue. And you're proposing something that doesn't fit any of those things. And the second question is really almost the same question, it's just from a different mindset. Isn't this going to cost us money? And we're going to have to put resources into this, and it's not giving us any benefit. So why would we invest in something that's not going to drive revenue? So these questions can be intimidating, but I encourage you not to be scared of talking about money. Really, these people are looking for answers. They have these questions because they want to know what your answer is to it. So don't shy away from the conversation. Instead, look at it as an opportunity to show why you want to do this and how open source actually can be an advantage to your company. The other concern they're going to have is about competition. It can feel like a risk to publish code, especially if it's code that is fairly important to your company. It could feel like you're giving up an advantage in the marketplace. The business is concerned about their competitive advantage, and they're concerned with things like stealing code. Are our competitors going to steal our code and somehow use it against us or use it to profit themselves? Or maybe they'll just steal the innovations that our code has and put those into their own product. Or maybe some people might be concerned about the code being criticized. They may worry about competitors using that against your company, trying to disparage your code. Or maybe even see that your code's not secure. All of these seem reasonable when someone mentions them, but if you really dig into it and think about it, they're not very realistic. When you think about stealing code, you're talking about two categories, really. You're talking about true trade secrets and then things that just fall under a general competitive advantage. It's unlikely that your code, especially if it's not your main product, has true trade secrets embedded in it. It may, and you want to keep that in mind, and as you're going through this process and talking to your legal team, they're going to want to know that. They'll probably ask, so definitely keep it in mind if that's a factor, but it's probably not very likely. The other concern is about competitive advantage and losing your competitive advantage. But the code itself is really probably not your competitive advantage. It might seem like it at first, but opening the code doesn't change anything about the value that your project can create for your business. That's your competitive advantage. And you don't really lose that by opening sourcing it. So remind a business person that you're creating value. They're also concerned about innovations. If you put your code out there, then all your innovations are just gone. Everyone can see them. And you'll pay all the development cost, and your competitors will get all the rewards. But it's unlikely that you have some secret sauce in your code that would magically make your competitors more successful. And if you do truly have innovations, there are ways to protect it, even through open source software licenses. And if something is patentable, like truly patentable, then you can work with your legal team on it, and that doesn't mean that you can't open source your project. And we'll talk more about that later. The last thing is exposing your code. That can feel very risky, especially to a business person that worries about what the fallout might be from that. The most likely criticism of your code would be just the quality of it. Competitors aren't going to get a competitive advantage by criticizing and disparaging your code, and the good news is you can fix it. This actually might even be an opportunity. Through your open source project, you could create some good standards, start fixing things, log issues, maybe even accept merge requests. So this actually could be your opportunity to start building engagement with your contributor community. The other likely criticism would be security, and that someone might identify security vulnerability, but you should welcome that, right? We all, I think, agree that open source software is the most secure software because it's the more eyes, the better. Security through obscurity is not a good practice, so don't use that as an excuse. So we've covered the misconceptions through the business and the competition, and once you've convinced your business people that the project has some merit and has potential, their next concern is going to be how you're going to organize it. That's why project management is actually a critical part of your plan for your project and a critical part of getting your project to be open source. The two main parts that you're going to worry about are going to be the legal aspects and how you're going to do the control of the project. Legal concerns can be a showstopper for trying to open source your code, and it's natural to want to avoid it. Nobody probably wants to have these conversations about legal issues, but I guarantee you it's on the mind of the business person. And their first reaction is going to be that you are walking into a legal nightmare and you're bringing the company with you. There's many concerns when you start thinking about the legal aspects of open source, but the two big ones are going to be intellectual property and licensing. On intellectual property, don't you lose all of the ability to protect your code and to protect your innovations when you go open source? No. The truth is, protecting software is hard, whether or not you're open source, but that doesn't mean you can't protect it, and that doesn't mean that open sourcing it loses all that. There are a variety of licenses out there that can make the code public and still provide you legal protections. There also may be concern that the contributors that contribute code to your project will hold a copyright, and that could be bad for your business. But really, open source licenses pretty much all take care of that. They include the copyright in the license. You could even have a separate contributor agreement, but that may make your project less friendly to contributors that are a little hesitant to, really sign an agreement or anything before they can contribute. So I don't recommend that, but that is something that some projects choose. The other thing is patents. If you do have anything that's patentable, it can still be protected, but it might dictate the license that you have to choose later. So you'll want to involve your legal team, and we'll talk more about involving the legal team in just a minute. Also, you want to think about what trademarks might be involved. If your company has trademarks, logos, anything that might need to be protected, you'll need to work with your legal team about whether or not those need to be protected separately from your open source code. The other concern that the business will have will be about the control of the project, and specifically about losing control of the project. Because I think some business people don't actually understand how open source works. They think that just anyone can push code into a project and things will turn to chaos. So you need to reassure them that you'll still have control of the project. You'll ultimately decide what makes it into the code. There also could be a concern possibly over forking. If your project gets forked and someone takes it in a different direction, I would say that probably is a good problem for you to have. If your project is so successful that someone wants to fork it and do something else with it, remember that your project more than likely is driving value for your paid product for your company. So if someone has that much passion around your paid product, that's a good thing. On code quality, they could be concerned about accepting merge requests. What if it's a bad merge request? It's terrible code, it's poorly written, it has security issues. We're just going to ruin our project. Remind the business that code quality can be controlled. You have contribution guidelines you can put on your project. There will be a process for accepting merge requests, going through code reviews, and that nobody can force you to accept code that doesn't meet your standards. And that's also why it's important to document those standards in your project. So we've encountered a lot of the misconceptions. Now it's time to counter those misconceptions. And this is actually an opportunity to show the benefits of open source by taking the misconceptions that people had and their concerns and showing them why there's actually benefit there. So again, we're going to start with money. We already said you can't make money, right? So it might be tempting to avoid the concept of money altogether. But don't avoid it. There's actually opportunity here. Instead, you can pivot your conversation to what I call indirect monetization. Really just means that there's many ways to add value and drive revenue for your software product that your company sells without specifically charging money for your code. You can also increase customer retention and create competitive advantages in the marketplace that will indirectly drive revenue. You might look for a project that lets you create enablement for your paid product. So any kind of enablement is going to create value. Perhaps there's something that you can do that will drive integrations with your product, because integrations are very powerful to enable your customers and any professional services teams you may have to create their own value. And the more that your customers integrate your product with other business critical products, the more critical your product becomes to the company and the more value that they're going to get. Same with plugins and automation. They add value, they meet business needs, and they make your product very critical to the business. And then custom development, if you could build a project that enables your customers to do their own custom development for your product, that's the ultimate enablement. And your customers are going to invest themselves and make your product integral to their business. All those investments and enablements and all the processes that they build around your product just keep them motivated to keep your product and to see the value that your product drives. So the capabilities from these are a competitive advantage. So if your open source project can create these enablements, you are creating a competitive advantage for your paid product through open source code. It might make your product more enticing, make your product more competitive in the market, and also entrench your existing customers in your product. Also, don't overlook the possibility for your professional services team to create more value through the enablements that you've created. If you give your professional services team more capability, not only are they going to drive more revenue, they're going to be more marketable, but also they're going to build solutions through your code for each and every customer, driving a recurring revenue stream. And then the more custom services that they get around your product, the more your product is entrenched, but also they've created revenue along the way. Besides money and enablement, you also can get a really good culture value by creating open source software. You can create a cultural advantage around your paid product through your open source code, because customers that feel connected and invested in a product are far less likely to move away from it. They're going to attribute more value to your product just because of the connections they have beyond the product. And if you can get your customers engaged in your open source product, then that's going to help them be really connected. Also, customers that feel a shared community around a product will be a competitive advantage. And so if you can create this open source culture and this open collaborative culture, you'll actually can extend that to your customers and get them to collaborate and help each other. That can increase retention, and they might even recruit their own industry peers. We've seen this at our company through other collaborative measures that we have. And open sourcing software allows your customers to contribute to your product and gain a sense of ownership. So none of those things directly create product sales revenue, but they do indirectly create revenue through other channels. Or at least they can be a powerful motivator in the market and competitive landscape and allow you to win more sales and gain more revenue. So you're convinced, you're excited, you're ready to write some code. Where do you start? That's easy, right? Just go out to GitHub or GitLab, create a project, and get on your way, right? No. Don't do that. Don't just go publish some code, put an open source license on it, and think you're good. You'll have enemies for your project faster than you can commit code. Instead of building software, the first thing you're building is a team of supporters. What you're looking for is people in the company that can help you work through the challenges that you're going to face in trying to get this accomplished. I'm going to help you identify some of the people that you need to look for and also tell you what role they're going to play in helping you get there. The first person that you need to get involved is going to be your manager. They should already be your biggest supporter, right? And you don't want to catch them off guard. And you also want to make sure that they understand how you're using your time. But also they can help you identify the other people that you'll need to recruit for this process, because your manager's pretty connected probably, and you want their help in recruiting. The next person you're going to need to find, probably the most important person, is the business partner. And this is not going to be your boss or even someone that's in your department. You want someone that has credibility outside of the technical circles that you normally run in. You're going to look for someone who understands the needs of the customer, and that means someone that probably actually talks to customers. Someone that understands the vision that you have for your project and can engage with that. Someone who can see the value that you're trying to create. You also want someone that has rapport with other people. You don't want that cranky guy in the corner that's always complaining. Nobody wants to talk to him. You want somebody that's friendly and somebody that has a rapport throughout the company that can influence others for your cause. And last, you want someone that has fortitude to push against resistance, because at times along the process, you're going to have resistance. So good, you have you and you have a business partner. That means that there's more than just a computer nerd behind this, so hopefully your project actually has some merit. Next, you need to find an executive sponsor. This person is not there to help you sell the idea. That's what your business partner is for. This person is to help you navigate bureaucracy and legal hurdles and to have some authority and influence. That's why you need someone that has that authority in your organization. Probably you're looking at someone at a director or VP level. Your manager or your business partner can help you identify and recruit that person to help you with your project. It's probably best that they're up the chain from you in the higher org hierarchy. They also want to understand the vision for your product. This isn't so that they can convince other people. It's really so that you can get their help more easily. Because the less they understand about what you're trying to do, the more hard it is going to be to get their help. Also, it helps if they're in your org chart because they can help provide a budget for your project. Because you're going to spend time on this. You might be recruiting some other people to spend time on this. Someone's going to start asking questions about where this money comes from. Where's this project align? Also, your executives probably have an insight into any legal processes that are involved. And that brings us to the legal team. It's likely that nobody here really wants to work with lawyers. They're a necessary partner in the process. And don't skip this part, because if you get questioned later about how your project impacted your company's intellectual property, you definitely want to say that you had approval from legal. The legal team is going to help you answer questions like, can we do this? Is there any avenue that we have already for doing this at our company? Or in the other direction, is there an outright ban on open source for some reason? And if so, you'll have to work against that. But assuming there is a way to do it, how do you do it? They're going to be the ones that tell you the process to get legal approval. There's probably some sort of an application that you're going to have to fill out, a questionnaire. You're going to have to answer questions about trade secrets, about patents, about other dependencies in your project. And then who needs to approve this? And again, the legal team will help you answer that and identify how you get approval to move forward with your project. The legal team is going to help you with covering your intellectual property. Most licenses cover copyrights, talked about that, but anything patentable, anything that is truly patent-worthy, you'll want to run through your legal team, and you'll have to see where you are and possibly in any patent application process, because publishing code could be public disclosure of a patent, and you might actually be asked to wait to release your code if there's something with a patent. The other side of patents is you might be concerned about contributor patents. If someone contributes something to your project that is patentable, who gets the patent on that? If that's a concern, depending on the nature of your project, you may need to get a license with an express patent grant included for contributions. The other thing your company or legal team will help you is how and when you can use trademarks for the company and any logos that may need to be protected. It's possible that you'll need to come up with completely separate items and branding for your project. When it comes to licenses, quick overview, there's a couple different types of licenses. Permissive licenses, they have no requirement for any downstream license. This is probably what you're looking for. They don't require whatever product uses you or any project that wants to use your code doesn't have to adopt any particular license. They can do whatever they want with your code. Examples of this are the MIT, Apache 2.0, and BSD licenses. If your dependencies are permissive, you too can also choose a permissive license. It's no problem. This gives you and the people that use your code the most freedom. However, if you're using dependencies that are licensed under a copyleft license like GPL, you'll be required to adopt that as well. And it's pretty unlikely in this type of company that you're going to be doing that. So I would avoid that. But your legal team does need to be involved in license selection. If you're looking at GPL or something, it's likely that you have a project that is much more isolated from your main product. So your legal team is going to help you choose your OSS license, and they're going to need to know things about your project to do that. They're going to need to know what are the goals of your project, what are the dependencies of your project, and you're going to have to work with them to help them determine what license. They're going to give you the guidance, but they can't do it on their own. The two common ones you're going to run across are the MIT license and Apache 2.0. MIT is short and sweet, and it covers copyrights, but that's about it. If your project is simple, you're not worried about those other aspects, MIT might be a really good way to go. It's possible, though, that your legal team will want you to go with Apache 2.0. It's more complex, but it also includes that express grant of patent rights. A really useful resource for you to just understand licensing a little deeper is chooselicense.com. You'll still want to involve your legal team, of course, in choosing your license, but it's a really good way to understand the differences between the licenses and all the options that are out there. Okay, so you've got your business on board, legal signed off. Now you can finally build your project and get to the fun stuff. Here's some considerations you'll need to worry about. What hosting platform are you going to use? GitLab and GitHub are great choices. It's possible your company has precedent for using a different platform. Maybe your company has some insight into something they want you to use, or you can just go off and do your own thing. You'll need to make sure you have contact info, or is it something as simple as just an email address that's going to be distributed to members of your team, or do you want to create a forum or a Slack or something around it? Also, what branding are you going to use? What logos? Do you have any marketing that needs to be done from your marketing team? Hopefully you've already determined your OSS license, but make sure it's in there from the beginning. You don't want to get caught in publishing some code and then trying to change your license after the fact. Also, you want to README, because people are going to wonder, what is this thing that you built? Why did you make it, and how do I use it? So get a good README in there that has the basic information about how to get going with your project. Then also you need to understand or identify what artifacts you're going to need. Is your project just going to be code? It might. It might be a zip file. Maybe it's a package that needs to be pushed out to some package manager. Then you also want to identify how you're going to manage the project. How are people going to report things to you? How do you track your own ideas? How do you put things out there that need to be worked on? GitHub and GitLab both offer things like that. You may want to use some third-party system, so you want to think about that. Same with merge requests. Who's going to look at the merge requests? Who's responsible for accepting them? Is there some process that has to be followed before you can accept one to make sure that it's good enough? Is there approval that needs to be done? You probably want some sort of a basic CI/CD pipeline at minimum to run some unit tests. You might also include things like dependency scans or vulnerability scans. And then also, if you've decided on any artifacts that you're going to produce for your project, this is where you try to produce them and publish them. The other thing you want to include for your project is some guidelines for how to interact with the community, how you get contributions in as far as code, but also just how the community interacts with your project in general. Do you have a strict format that you want people to follow for code? Is there naming conventions, standards that need to be followed? Part of interaction with the community is the responsible disclosure of vulnerabilities. You'll want to state this in your project so that, and give people a private method of communicating vulnerabilities to you so that they don't just log them as a public issue and accidentally publish some vulnerability that you haven't had a chance to fix. The last thing you want to think about potentially including is a code of conduct. Really all that is just a clear statement of inclusiveness. It's trying to make sure you foster an opportunity and environment for people to be included in your project and contribute. The good thing is you don't have to create this yourself. There's already something out there called the Contributor Covenant. Their goal is stated to be overt in our openness and foster an atmosphere of kindness, cooperation, and understanding. So I encourage you to go check out Contributor Covenant. You can just download their covenant for free, and they release new versions of it, and you included it in your project. So what are the results? At RSA, we did this. We went through all this process. A lot of it was done by me. Some of it was done by people on my team. And what results did we see? Have we seen any changes? We have seen some culture change. We've seen a shift in culture about teams thinking about creating open source. We've actually seen some teams even start to create open source projects from the beginning. Like they actually go into a project with the intent of making it open source. We've also seen more acceptance at the business level of using open source software in our company. We've seen other projects get created and business people that are engaging with open source, and actually some of our product team people are actually talking about open source in their projects like it's a feature, which is something very new. We've never experienced open source as something that they're excited about and talking about as a selling point. So I hope this session has triggered some ideas for you about what you could possibly make open source, whether it's a new project or existing code that you have, and also who you could work with in your company to infuse some open source culture. And also I want you to think about how your company could benefit from that open source culture. Thanks for your time. I appreciate you guys being here and letting me come speak. Find me around if you want to discuss any of these ideas or how we can talk about how you could create an open source culture in your closed source company. Thank you.